11th victims announced a lawsuit today to cut off the financial pipeline that funds al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. Named in the $1 trillion lawsuit are banks, Islamic charities, and several members of the Saudi royal family. Family members involved in the lawsuit and their attorneys spoke to reporters at this hour and 15-minute news conference in Washington.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Ron Motley. I'm a lawyer from Charleston, South Carolina, and I am lead trial counsel for this case that was brought this morning on behalf of over 600 families who suffered losses as a result of the atrocities of September the 11th. The format today will be to have some of the families speak to you personally from their hearts about why they've taken this action, what they expect to accomplish from this action, and then I will introduce you to several of our investigators, and then I will explain the legal bases for the case, and then answer questions that relate to the case itself, the defendants, and the theories. And you can feel free to ask the families any questions that you see fit. If it's a question that's more appropriately answered by a member of the legal team, I will do it, or Mr. Gerson will do it. Mr. Gerson is my co-lead counsel. He's the author of a book on terrorism and was one of the leading attorneys in the Lockerbie Flight 103 disaster, which is being currently negotiated with the Libyan government. With that, I'd like to introduce first to you Tom Burnett Sr., Beverly Burnett, the mother and father of Thomas E. Burnett, who died at age 38, who was the leader of the charge on the cockpit of Flight 93, successfully causing that plane not to reach its target, the White House, and his wife, Dina, all of whom are here and all of whom have something they want to say to you, and then I will introduce you to others who also want to speak. Tom?
Thanks, Ron. I'm pleased to be here, and I welcome you people. It's my pleasure to meet some of the other families who have suffered losses. I have prepared a statement that I'd like to read. Our son, Thomas E. Burnett, Jr., was a hero on Flight 93. He was drafted unknowingly as one of the first citizen soldiers of the war on terrorism. And he did serve his country with calm, with decisiveness, with leadership, and with courage. Thanks to the extraordinary character shown by him and his fellow passengers, hundreds and perhaps thousands of lives were saved in Washington, D.C. It was Tom's leadership, courage, and patriotism in mind that I stand here proudly to announce that my wife and I, along with many other families and survivors of September 11th, are taking unprecedented legal action against those whose money financed the unspeakable evil that occurred on that tragic day. In taking this action, we will move terrorist financing schemes out of the shadows and into the light of day, exposing for the world the underbelly behind the atrocities of 9/11, and leaving those with evil intentions nowhere to hide and no place to escape accountability. We will succeed because we have the facts and the law on our side. Because we have an unparalleled legal and investigative team representing the best talent and expertise in the area of international law and finance on our side. And because we have justice and morality on our side. Nothing could be a greater tribute to Tom's memory. Tom's last words were, "We're going to do something," and today we're going to do something too. Thank you.
On the morning of September 11th, the phone rang, and the lives of my 3 daughters and myself changed forever. It was Tom calling from the cabin of Flight 93. In a series of 4 conversations that I will hear over and over in my memory for the rest of my life, Tom told me that his plane was hijacked. I told him what happened at the World Trade Center, and he calmly assessed the situation and then acted. He told me, I'm putting a plan together, and there's a group of us who's going to take back the airplane. He later said, it's up to us. I think we can do it. Those words, I think, mean just as much to those of us standing here today. It's up to us, and I think we can do it. It's up to us to bankrupt the terrorists and those who finance them so they will never again have the resources to commit such atrocities against the American people as we experienced on September 11th. Our American troops are halfway around the world, laying their lives on the line every day to fight the war against terrorism. They're doing all they can. It's up to us here in America to do all we can. By filing this lawsuit, this is our only source of retribution, our only source of action to help stop them. And so we'll use the court system, but it's going to be a tough fight. And we're probably going to need your help. In the coming months, we'll need letters written to congressmen and senators to encourage the Senate Intelligence Committee to stand in our favor and to help provide documents and records and information that will help us to freeze the assets of the defendants named in this lawsuit. And I'm sure that over the coming months, we'll be back to appeal to you to help us in any way that you can, and to act with courage, as my husband and the passengers on Flight 93 did. They acted. They acted with courage and honor and valor, and now it's up to us to do the same.
Matt Salito is the father of a remarkable young man, Matthew Carmen Salito, who was 23 years old, who worked for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of One World Trade Center. I've come to know the Salito family personally. I'm very proud of their courage in bringing this action, and Matt, the father of Matthew Carmen Salito, would like to say a few words.
Good morning. My son Matthew Salito was just 23 years old, working in an excellent job that he looked forward to from the age of 13. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of One World Trade Center. He was strong, young, and determined to become a success. He felt that he was on top of the world, both literally and figuratively. His loss is incomprehensible to me. My heart continues to ache and will ache for the rest of my life. Yet my wife, my son Jonathan, and I are more committed than ever to honor Matthew's values and determination in the best way possible. Matthew stood out for his ability to beat the odds, his tenacity, and his knack for always doing the right thing. He was the first one to work in the morning and the last one to leave at night. That is why I honor him deeply and profoundly by joining this action today. For this is the right thing to do. If the odds are stacked against us, we will beat them. And we will pursue this action until justice is served and terrorism is stopped. Congress and the President have given us the tools to accomplish this essential goal. Tools that build on the existing justice system, which empowers us to have our day in court and get against those who murdered my son. I was raised in a family that was taught stealing is wrong. But the person who buys the stolen goods, knowing they are stolen, is even more wrong. I use this analogy because I feel the terrorists were wrong. But the people who aided and abetted and allowed them to do this are more wrong. It does not matter whether the weapon of choice is a gun, a bomb, a box cutter, a pen used to write a check, or the computer mouse clicked to transfer funds. The banks, so-called charities, and the individuals named in this action have the blood of my son on their hands, and they have the blood of more than 3,000 other precious, irreplaceable people on their hands. And we will hold them accountable. To my son Matthew, God bless you. To our country, please help us. And I leave you with God bless America.
Thank you, Matt. April Gallup and her baby son, Alicia, were injured in the attack on the Pentagon. April, and I'm sure Alicia, will have something to say to you. She would like to speak to you about what she has suffered and why she's bringing this action. April?
On 11 September, my son was with me that day to prepare him for daycare at the Pentagon. What could be safer, I thought to myself. It would be more convenient, safer. I could pop in and eat lunch with him or check up on him if he wasn't feeling well. Little did we know what evil plans was in store for us. In a split second, it seemed as if a bomb had gone off. That blast blew Elijah from his stroller, and then fire erupted all around. I could hear him, but I couldn't see him. I was trapped from the waist down. There was fire and smoke, and I feared that there was no way we were going to get out. Eventually, I was able to free myself and someone else who was trapped, and then we both started feeling and searching for Elijah. The smoke was so thick, we couldn't see anything. Then, thank God, we found Elijah under a pile of wreckage. With the help of other brave souls, we were able to get out of the building. I am one of the fortunate ones. I survived to tell our story, and I still have my magnificent son, as you can see here, with me, and I thank God every day for this blessing, this miracle, and I now understand the miracle of life. But this gratitude doesn't diminish the pain and the suffering that we still feel from the injuries, the hardships we haven't endured, the trauma that still rocks us, or my desire to make the enemy pay. And pay, they will pay through the actions that we take today. We will hold those who bankroll terrorism accountable, win justice for the families and survivors, and send a clear and unmistakable message around the world that anyone, and I mean anyone, who finances, supports, or enable terrorists will pay a fearsome price. This action is a profoundly patriotic act because we are exercising uniquely American rights and because we will help protect Americans from future acts of terrorism. Proud as I was to receive the Purple Heart, I will be even prouder when we bankrupt the sponsors of terrorism and bring them to justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, April. Terry Strada is the wife of Thomas Strada, who is a bond broker for Cantor Fitzgerald and who perished in Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. She wants to speak to you about why she's participating along with the other 600 families in this lawsuit.
September 11th is a national tragedy. It is a worldwide catastrophe reaching far across the oceans, affecting and hurting thousands of people. It will live in our hearts, and it is embedded in our minds forever. It is all of those things and more. It is the day my husband, like countless others, woke up to a beautiful Tuesday morning, ready to start his day like any other. Only for Tom and I, it was a little different. We had just brought home our third child, Justin Thomas, on Saturday. Our family was complete, and we had everything to live for. Our lives were rich with love for each other and love for our 3 young children. He was a devoted family man. My children had the best possible father. He adored them and lived his life for them. They lost their innocence and the life they were supposed to have. They will never see, play, or hug their daddy again. My husband will never hold them or watch them grow up, and I will never feel his arms around me again. He made our life full, fun, and happy. Our lives were rich beyond what money could buy. We had it all. Then, hijacked planes crashed into the Twin Towers and took it all away from us. It took over 3,000 innocent, beautiful people that day. It took fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, fiancés, lovers, and friends. It took people with bright futures and loving families from all of us. Americans lost their sense of security, and fear crept into our hearts. Terrorism was witnessed live and up close around the world. It came without warning and shattered lives, destroyed couples' futures. It frightened our children to their core and crippled parents as they watched their own children disappear. Terrorism came to America, but it caused pain around the world. Terrorism must be seen for what it is, an act of cowardice against innocent people, an act of hatred towards each and every one of us. We must not just speak out against it, we must act out against it. And this is what Ness Motley is doing. It is filing a suit that will go after terrorism in a vital way. By taking their assets, the actual dollars that fund the Al-Qaeda and terrorists, we can cripple them. We can bankrupt them. We can stop them. Terrorism is a threat to the very lives and freedoms we are all entitled to live. It is in my husband's name, Tom Strada, on behalf of my children, Thomas, Caitlin, and Justin, in remembrance of his Cantor friends, and in honor of every person that died with him, that I wish to do what I can to bring this to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Ellen Saraceni is the wife of Victor Saraceni, age 51, who was the captain of United Airlines Flight 175.
Good morning. My name is Ellen Saraceni. My husband is Captain Victor J. Saraceni from United Flight 175 that was hijacked and struck the South Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th at 9:03 a.m. This is now what we all have to live with. I stand here today without my husband, the one I chose to be with, my companion, to love and to honor. I lost my best friend. He stood by my side and made me whole. But I am not alone. By my side are those whose lives were irrevocably changed. And as I look out at all of you, I see your lives were changed also. You all share in our sorrow and our pain. As Americans, we lost our innocence. We were totally unprepared for the actions of those who have no clue about what life is about. We will now take legal action to identify individuals and entities that lend financial support to bin Laden and his terrorist network. This is now a defining time when we show terrorists that we will not stand still and allow them to do as they please. I join with the families of September 11th to strike back at the terrorists, the plaintiffs and the families of those killed in the attacks. We are united in both our grief and our resolve to root out the perpetrators of this evil and all who support them. We want the world to understand that we will do everything in our power to prevent these cowards from ever inflicting harm on anyone again. Thank you for your concerns and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ellen. Vicki Shoemaker is the mother of Alan David Kleinberg, who was a Cantor Fitzgerald securities trader in Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. Ms. Shoemaker?
Hello. My son, Alan, was my pride and joy. On September 11th, he was murdered while he was sitting at his desk. Our family, needless to say, will never be the same. We struggle day to day, one day at a time. My daughter-in-law, my grandchildren, Alan's sisters, Alan's grandparents. It is urgent, very urgent, that any individual or corporation that is funding terrorism must be stopped. And they must be stopped within the guidelines of the law, even though they don't really work within the guidelines of the law themselves. And we must stop them now, so this can never happen again. And I'm doing this for you, Alan, my son. We're doing this for you. We're doing this for all the other victims of that day, of that horrendous day. And I want to thank Mr. Motley and his team for helping us with this battle. Thank you.
Dr. Stephen Alderman and his wife Liz lost their son Peter at the World Trade Center. And Dr. Alderman has asked to have the opportunity to address you.
Good morning. I just wish to read a short personal statement. On September 11th, 2001, our 25-year-old son, Peter, was attending a conference on Windows at the World when a sneak attack on the United States converted the World Trade Center into a slaughterhouse. Peter was vaporized. We will never know the depth of his suffering or the extent of his fear before he died. His body was never recovered. Although we cannot prove that high-ranking Saudi officials committed this atrocity, we know for a certainty that they were the terrorists' travel agents who delivered them well-fed, well-trained, and well-equipped to the World Trade Center that day. Since childhood, Pete passionately believed in fairness and justice. He can no longer seek these for himself. In his stead, his mother and I, working with Ness Motley and Gerson, will obtain accountability from these Saudis
for this act of barbarism. We are implacable. We are prepared to pursue them for the rest of our lives or until they admit their complicity and culpability. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anybody want to say anything? You're welcome to. Thank you, Dr. Alderman. The 600 family members who... Oh, I'm sorry.
I just decided to say something because this is very difficult for me. My daughter was 36 years old and she worked at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. She worked on the 64th floor. And before she died, killed, murdered, the word. She was on the phone, she called her father up. And she says, "Daddy," and hysterical crying, she couldn't stop, and he calmed her down. And she put on the television set because we were watching the children. We babysit for her 3 days a week and 2 days a week. And he put on the television and he saw the flames, which in the papers all the time, we're reminded we never have a moment's peace because there's always something going on. And now September 11th is coming up again, and we've decided we're not going to any more memorials for her because it's too heartrending. And my husband, he can't handle it. I don't know how I handle it. I think my daughter's spirit is with me because she was very strong. And she was a backbone for me at lots and lots of times through all the illnesses I've been through. She was there for me. I don't have that now. I have my wonderful son, but it's not having the daughter. It's a different feeling. But I want to get these, I should like to use a word that I shouldn't use, but I won't do it because it wouldn't be ladylike. But I want to get these terrorists, Saddam Hussein, the Saudis, the Iraqs, anyone who had anything to do with the people with the money in the banks, the people that we're holding this money that the government has, it's right there. We can't go out and fight. We can't do anything. We just stand around and just suffer in silence because there's not a thing we can do, but this is the only thing we can do. And thank God for Mr. Motley and Alan, sorry for using his first name, and Guy Molinari and John D'Amato on Staten Island, because they are our backbone, and that's the only thing we can do to stop this pipeline of money going to these terrorists. Because without that money, what are they going to do? All they have is all these people who are brainwashed, and they're peasants. They have no money. They don't know what's going on. Or they're told by these people that Allah, they'll go to heaven and have all these mistresses up there. They're going to have a wonderful life in heaven, better than on this earth. They're crazy, because this earth that we're on is where it's wonderful. This is heaven on earth, even though we're going through tragedy right now. This is our life, and none of us know what the future is if we all die. So we have to think of our children, our grandchildren, think what my son-in-law is going through, raising the twins on his own. And the hardest thing is us as parents, because losing a child and all those wonderful people that died, innocent people in the World Trade Center, have loving families, have wonderful families to go home to. Now those families are going to suffer. There's no such thing as closure. People say, oh, you'll have closure, because I was lucky. Can you say, that's a joke. I'm lucky I found my daughter. They found her. She was in Bellevue Hospital for about 3 weeks. She wore one of these bracelets because she suffered from asthma and allergies. This must have got pulled off on the staircase when she was they walked down to the 24th floor. There was 14 of them. 2 of them, I think Pasquale, he was in the paper, they were very fortunate. They survived when the stairs collapsed, the walls caved in. How I know this? Because the person who survived told us that they were all holding hands, the 14 of them walking down the stair, 16. And out of those 16, 2 perished. The others, 2 were alive. They were allowed to tell their story on television. And they all were the same group from the same office. And I can't say anymore because it's too hard. I just want you to know that we need your help, because it's not the money that we care. It's just it's vindictive. We want to do something to get at these people because there's nothing else that we can do. And I hope we can have your support. Thank you.
Several others who are here wanted to say something. I wanted to share with you, a lady cannot be here today, who gave me a source of inspiration. This is her son, Carl Molinari, and he was killed rescuing people at the World Trade Center. He is one of literally dozens of firefighters who have joined this lawsuit in the last few days. And every time I feel despondent or overstressed, I pull this picture out. I keep it close to me. And on the back of it is a fireman's prayer. I will be glad to show this to anyone who wishes to see it. Several other family members want to speak to you briefly, and then I will try to address the merits of the lawsuit.
My name is Patricia Gambino, and my brother Michael Weinberg, firefighter Michael Weinberg, was on vacation on September 11th. I was in the South Tower on the 72nd floor. I managed to make it out of the building. My brother was killed. So for me, it's sort of an obligation on behalf of him, and more importantly, for the American people, to prevent this from ever happening again. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tara Bain, and I lost my husband on September 11th, Michael Bain. He worked in One World Trade Center, the 100th floor. I agree with everyone who has spoken here today, but there are just two other points I wanted to make. Shortly after I found out the news of the planes hitting the towers and them then collapsing, I was on the phone with my father, and he said to me, "Tara, no matter what happens, your life will never be the same." And recently I remembered that discussion with him. And as the days went on and we just sat and waited, and one of the strongest feelings I remember was feeling so helpless that we couldn't do anything, and we had to wait and hear if they found him, if he was alive, if they found anyone else. A few weeks after the event of September 11th, I was at a memorial that my husband's company had at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I looked around the church, and there were over 3,500 people there. And at that point, the count was up to 6,000, and I was sickened by looking at the number of people in that room and realizing more than that had died at the hands of terrorists. So as the months gone on, I have to do something. I cannot sit back and wait and see if something like September 11th happens again, because the horror that I went through and the horror that all of us here have went through, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And if I'm capable of helping to bring a halt to terrorism, I have to do that. And I appreciate everyone's support here, and I know it's a battle, and we all have to fight together to keep our country what it was. Thank you.
The 600 families who have agreed to participate in this suit, and I'm told by former Borough President Molinari and Mr. D'Amato that another 50 have called this morning. We expect by the end of September to have upwards of 1,000 victims' family members who are participating in this lawsuit. There are members of the United States Armed Services who are participating, firefighters, police officers, emergency technicians, those who helped clean up after the towers collapsed, flight attendants, pilots, passengers, people who worked in the World Trade Center, people who worked at the Pentagon, and people who were injured at the Marriott Hotel. As of 5 o'clock yesterday, among the 600 plus family members are residents of New York, Virginia, Texas, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, California, Kansas, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, the District of Columbia, Arkansas, Nevada, my home state of South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, and foreign countries such as Canada. Now, somebody wrote down Puerto Rico as a foreign country, but I don't think it is. Puerto Rico, Paraguay, Argentina, South Africa, France, and Switzerland. The complaint, which is available to those who want to read it, is 258 pages in length. Jody, would you bring me that stack back up here, please? I would like to take a moment to introduce you to two of our principal investigators. We have 5 investigators who have been working tirelessly. They have an accumulated experience of investigating terrorism, international financing of terrorism, and the activities of Al-Qaeda for over 40 years. John Charles Bessard is here from France. He wrote the principal report, was the principal author of the report of the French National Assembly, their Congress, which was given to our government and to our Intelligence Committee, and he is serving as a consultant to the Senate Intelligence Committee. John Charles will be interviewed tonight on CNN with respect to his activities, but I wanted to show you, for those of you who wonder what we've been doing for the last 5 months, this is the report on just one bank and on their activities. This is a report on one of the bank defendants. This is a 258-page complaint. Now, in federal court in the United States, we're not obligated as lawyers to do any more than file a short, plain, and concise statement of the facts. But in consultation with our clients, we decided to lay out all the facts as we know them today. And even as I speak, we continue to receive reports from our investigators, which includes the Search for International Terrorist Entities, or SITE Institute, which is a resource for those seeking information about terrorist activities around the world. Based in Washington, D.C., the SITE Institute provides information through media outlets in an effort to educate the public on issues surrounding terrorism. The SITE Institute's director, Rita Katz, is here. She has spent years studying and understanding the threat that our society suffers from those who fund terrorism. She is the foremost expert in her field, and her insights continually appear in several prominent publications and television shows. We have 4 other investigators who are currently, this is Rita and John Charles Bessard. We have 4 other investigators who are currently in the field in various countries gathering information. I'm proud to say that the intelligence services of 5 foreign countries have cooperated with us turned over information to us, including foreign countries in Central Asia. We are accumulating this information on a daily basis, but we felt that we have sufficient information at this time to bring this complaint prior to September the 11th. I'll show you one of Rita's handiworks. This is just one volume of the exhibits to her report on one charity which was illegitimately and illegally raising funds for Al-Qaeda, which money was laundered through various banks and placed into the hands of the terrorists. They will be available to answer questions for you at the end of this presentation. I have taken the liberty this statement was issued by an Al-Qaeda spokesman in June of 2002. This is Osama bin Laden's grand plan. These are his words, not mine. We have not reached parity with them yet, meaning us, America. We have the right to kill 4 million Americans, 2 million of them children, and to exile twice as many and wound and cripple hundreds of thousands. Furthermore, it is our right to fight them with chemical and biological weapons. America is kept at bay by blood alone. June 12, 2002. We are dealing here with the ultimate of the evil empire. This lawsuit is being brought to make accountable those who have knowingly participated, aided and abetted the funding of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. These activities began in the mid-1980s. One of the main goals of this lawsuit is to allow the families to ventilate, to publicly air the facts as we learn them. And we learn them more and more every day. But we felt like, and in consultation with these families, and in meetings with them in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and other locations, they wanted us to do something once we had solid evidence. We have solid evidence. I have displayed for you some of the evidence. Here's the money trail that lists the defendants, the individuals, the banks, the charities. In the complaint, we detail how the money got sent to various places. We name names, we name places, and we name events. This in no way means that the investigation is over. When a lawsuit is filed, it's filed based upon sufficient evidence so that we can look a federal judge in the eye and say, Judge, we have enough evidence to warrant filing a complaint, and we want to take discovery. And this, we have no delusions here. I've asked Dr. Jeff Wigan, a veteran of the tobacco wars, who was trashed by an investigator on behalf of the tobacco companies. I won't mention his name. And he's here to help the victims understand that this is a 3 to 4 year struggle. We will take discovery of these defendants. We fully expect the Saudi nationals and the Gulf state banks to fight. But if they fight, they must fight here. They must cross the oceans and appear in court here in Washington, D.C. We picked Washington, D.C. because this court in Washington, D.C. has had experience in interpreting the anti-terrorist laws that were enacted in the 1990s, mainly with the bravery of the victims of Flight 103 with the leadership of Alan Gerson, who I'm going to ask to speak to you in a moment. Now, some of you may say, how is it foreseeable that fundamental Islamic terrorists would hijack airplanes and fly them into some of America's most cherished landmarks? The answer to that question was known to the United States government in 1995. Computer tapes were seized in Manila at a meeting of Al-Qaeda in 1995, which described something called the Bojinka Plan, B-O-J-I-N-K-A plan. The Bojinka Plan was a mastermind plan to hijack 12 airplanes and fly them into the Pacific Ocean, killing all aboard. The backup plan to the Bojinka Plan was to do exactly what was done on September the 11th, 2001. By name, the Al-Qaeda operatives listed the World Trade Center as a destination for a hijacked terrorist jetliner. By name. By name, they listed the White House. By name, they listed Langley, where the CIA is headquartered, the Sears Tower, landmarks in San Francisco. Al-Qaeda and bin Laden and their financiers have been planning this assault on America for 6 years prior to the launching of this assault. This was a carefully orchestrated and planned attack on the very fabric of American society. This was not the first time that Al-Qaeda has struck at American interest. They killed American servicemen in Somalia. They attempted to blow up the World Trade Center previously. They destroyed 2 American embassies in Africa. They attacked the United States destroyer, the USS Cole. They were recently stopped from attacking yet another USS military war vessel. One of their members was stopped for a traffic violation on his way to the Los Angeles airport with a trunk full of plastic explosives that could have killed thousands of people. Even as we speak, our government has admitted that there are probably sleeper cells of terrorists in this country planning yet another atrocity. It is the goal, and I think I speak with unanimity for all the 600-plus family members who are backing this lawsuit. It's the goal here to achieve accountability, to publicize the facts as we learn them, and there's plenty of facts in here. Some of you may have a good night's sleep reading through some of these facts. Some of you may not sleep at all when you read about what the terrorists did and how these folks knowingly funded terrorism. You may not know this, but on the Saudi Arabian, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's website, they boast of $150 million they've paid to so-called martyrs who strap bombs on their bodies and get on buses, enter universities, and kill innocent citizens, Americans, Israelis, Palestinians alike. That kingdom sponsors this terrorism. It sponsors Hamas. It pays the victims, the so-called martyrs, for killing people. This is an insidious group of people. I have no doubt that the list of defendants will increase as we receive additional reports, but we have received sufficient information, unequivocal information confirmed recently by the RAND report to the Department of Defense, by the French government, by sources within Spain, Bosnia, and Italy, that these defendants are responsible in the main for the funding of Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. The complaint alleges causes of action based on various federal statutes. And at this time, before I turn it over for questions, and I'm going to turn it over for questions, not speeches. I would ask Mr. Gerson. Alan Gerson is the author of a very well-known book on the Lockerbie Flight 103 experience and helped shepherd the legislation through the Congress of the United States, which allows these families today to stand before you and before our courts seeking the implication of the rule of law of our country. They can run and they can hide, but they will not escape. There's no cave big enough in Afghanistan to hide these banks. Alan?
Good morning. I would like to first say what an enormous honor and privilege it is for me to be here today, this historic moment, in the company of all of these courageous individuals who, despite their enormous losses, have found the strength to confront the perpetrators of terror and to seek accountability. I want to publicly tell you how terribly proud I am to be associated with Ron Motley, with Ness Motley, and the entire team that we have assembled on behalf of all of these families. I'd like to simply share something with you that the rest of my team is not aware of. Late last night, I checked my email, and I received the following message from a very prominent former U.S. official, a former national security advisor to the president. And this is what he had to say. "This suit is a very worthy project. Discovery and the suit can lead to a vital contribution to national security and, at a minimum, expose the Saudis and others for what they really are." And then there is a personal note. He says, "Keep in mind that the defendants in this suit will, quote, spend whatever they think is required on Washington lobbyists and PR to defeat and defame you." And he ends in these words, "hang tough." And I can assure you that we will hang tough. I can assure you that the fundamental principle which he articulated in this note, that national security and the U.S. national interest are inextricably linked, is a principle we want to espouse today, because that requires taking recognition of the rights of ordinary American citizens, a right which has been guaranteed to them by the U.S. courts to hold the perpetrators of terrorism accountable. In our complaint, we also make reference to the historic legacy of Nuremberg, especially the later Nuremberg cases called the industrialists and bankers cases. And those cases made clear that it is not only those individuals that pull the trigger or that plant the bombs or that engage in genocide that will be held accountable, but also those who helped finance it by whatever means. We think the difference between the horrors of September 11th and genocide is simply a question of degree. And we intend to hang tough in making sure that those, as others have said, have used simply a click on a computer or written a check, that it makes no difference. And through that, we seek one, exposure, and two, accountability, not for its own sake, but accountability as a legacy to all Americans, to the realization that those countries, those individuals, those banks that have financed terrorism in the expectation that it is a cost-free endeavor will be proven wrong. They will have to pay a price, and through that price, we intend to assure that there will be deterrence against the commission of such future acts. Thank you.
I will be glad to entertain questions from the media. If you would mind introducing yourself and which media you're with. Mr. Alan Frank, I know you well, sir.
Ron, what do you expect to accomplish by suing members of the Saudi royal family, and can you tell us a little bit about your allegations against them?
Well, the allegations against them are contained in the complaint. They're very elaborate, and I'll be glad to point you to the pages. But what we seek to accomplish here is certain members of the Saudi royal family have been very active supporters of and aiders and abettors of the funding of al-Qaeda and bin Laden himself. We received, through French intelligence sources, the interpretation, I can't speak French like Mr. Broussard can, an interpretation of a secretly recorded meeting between representatives of bin Laden and 3 Saudi princes in which they sought to pay him hush money to keep bin Laden from attacking their own enterprises in Saudi Arabia, all of which is elaborated in the complaint in great detail. And if you want, I'll tell you the pages that it's on. Okay? Anybody else from the media? Africa? Yes, ma'am. And would you tell me where you're from?
Peters with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Have you alerted the Justice Department to your lawsuit, and what does the administration think? And who was the National Security Advisor who said hang tough? Former National Security Advisor.
I'll have to defer to him on that, then I'll ask for your question.
Since I received that message late last night, I have to await his permission, but I can assure you it was a prominent former National Security Advisor to the President.
The other part of your question is have we alerted the Department of Justice? The answer to that question is in various back-channel ways. We have advised certain members, former advisors to the Justice Department, of what we are embarking upon. To answer your question about cooperation, we've met with the State Department on 3 occasions, and we have received a grand total of 0 pieces of paper and 0 help. Most of our help, these victims have been very active in lobbying for a independent commission, such as investigated Pearl Harbor. It passed the House of Representatives in a weakened form. It's now in the United States Senate. With the help of all these folks and all the other victims and their victims' organizations, we hope that the Senate will pass a bill which will allow an independent investigation of all facets of this, and hopefully that information will be forthcoming. But we have no reason to believe that we will be given cooperation or documents from the State Department. We have, however, received documents from other foreign countries which turned over documents to the State Department. So we're exploring those sources. Yes, ma'am, and who are you with?
Canadian Broadcasting.
I'm sorry, with whom?
Canadian Broadcasting.
How are you?
Good, thanks. You mentioned that Canadians were part of this suit. Have you found any Canadian connection with terrorist money, and is the Canadian government one of these states that is helping you in this investigation?
We have not asked for nor received any assistance from the Canadian government. There are several Canadian nationals who were killed on September the 11th. One of the, and this is set forth again in the complaint, I hate to keep referring you to the complaint, but it's 258 pages long, and I have not committed it to memory. There is a reference in here to activities of one of the Islamic charities in Canada. More than one. My expert, Ms. Katz, tells me it's more than one. Yes, sir, and who are you with?
Audio Reval, ABC News. Sir, since 9/11, there's been a financial war on terrorism conducted by the Treasury Department, the U.S. government, and other foreign countries, Operation Green Quest, et cetera, et cetera. And since 9/11, they've frozen or blocked the assets of some of these charities and banks and individuals mentioned in that list right there. Do you think there's an overlap? Is this lawsuit being redundant in that sense because some of these assets have already been blocked? It's over $100 million now, I think, just in the U.S. alone. And given the fact that some of these assets have been blocked and frozen already, how will you get access to their assets?
Well, number one, they didn't freeze all the assets that needed to be frozen. They didn't seize the assets of certain of the operation centers, particularly in Bosnia. They didn't freeze the assets of everybody whose assets needed to be frozen. There are plenty of assets of these banks, which some of whose assets were not frozen. And when you get right down to it, while the government may have frozen it, it's not helping these folks out at all. Being frozen by the United States government is not the same thing as these families being compensated for their losses, nor, sir, does it allow them to expose what happened. The freezing of an asset doesn't help them understand what happened. They want to know what happened. They want to air it. They want to make it public. They want the public to know about it, and they want the Congress to do something about it. So the mere freezing, and by the way, all of these charities did not have their assets frozen. Most of the banks had nothing frozen, and none of, with one exception, these individuals had their assets frozen. You have people on this list, by the way, who have hundreds of millions of dollars in assets in the United States that have not been touched. Why do I think that's the case? This is a good place to invest money.
You're saying that the United States government is not doing enough, or they purposely overlooking
They may not have sufficient evidence or a belief. You understand they have to operate under a very strict set of rules which don't apply to these lawsuits. We're entitled to sue defendants that we think are responsible. The standard under our civil justice system is preponderance of the evidence, which is 51%. They have a much more rigid standard. You'd have to ask them why they didn't seize more than they did. At least they did something. Yes, sir.
Terry Kibble, Newhouse Newspapers.
Yes, sir.
Can you estimate how much in reparations you're seeking from these defendants?
Well, that's a difficult question. First of all, as I stated earlier, over 600 family members have now joined the suit. My colleagues from Staten Island tell me they had 50 more sign up already this morning. We have meetings with 5 other victims groups. We expect to have more than 1,000 by the end of August. Until we have an idea of how many victims' families are involved, it's very difficult to assess what the damages will be. In federal court, you're not required to say how much you seek in damages, but under some of the federal statutes that we're suing under, you can receive treble damages, like Enron, if they ever get hauled into court. You don't just give back the dollars you stole from the pensioners, you give back the dollars times 3. So whatever damages we have under one of the federal statutes will be treble. So it's difficult to give you an idea, but it's in excess of hundreds of billions of dollars. It's in excess. We're seeking in excess of what we collected against the tobacco companies, which was $365 billion. I'll put it that way. Yes, ma'am.
It would just be really helpful if you could, you haven't done this yet, just summarize, explain your legal strategy. Would you just do that?
Yes, ma'am. We have several statutes that permit victims to sue people who aid and abet. I think you all understand what that means, or support, knowingly contribute financial support. A case that this summer was decided by the Court of Appeals, in Federal Court of Appeals in the 7th Circuit, lays out all of the factors that you can use to employ to bring terrorists to bay, one of which is providing money for martyrs, which Saudi Arabia has done with respect to Hamas. We know that already. We hope to be able to establish and have established for at least one of the families of the hijackers that they provided funding for them. The other causes of action are based on federal common law. There's the Anti-Terrorist Act of 1996, and there's what's known as the Flatlow Amendments, which allow these folks a more liberal standard of damages, much more liberal than are being applied in the Federal Compensation Fund, where, as you may know, the families are limited in the money they can recover for the loss, the grief and sorrow and humiliation that they feel at the loss of a loved one. The federal statutes have no such artificial limits that the Federal Compensation Fund has. And while I'm saying this, let me say this about that. The Patriots Act of the year 2001 specifically states that the victims can sue the airlines, the World Trade Center, the people who failed to implement a fire escape program, or they can go into the Federal Compensation Fund. But in addition to that right, the Patriots Act of 2001 specifically entitles, enables, and encourages victims of terrorism to bring this kind of lawsuit. So they have 2 rights. go to the federal fund and
Belo Broadcasting, headquartered in Texas. I noticed that
what part?
Dallas, but we have 4 other cities.
I spend a lot of time in Beaumont.
Thank you.
I'm not bragging about that.
I noticed on some of your charts that you mentioned the Holy Land Foundation, which is based in Richardson, Texas.
Yes, sir.
I didn't see it in the complaint. I also noticed you mentioned Hamas supporting at least, you believe, one of the families of the terrorist. Do you anticipate
I didn't say Hamas. I said Saudi and other Gulf state entities supported one of the terrorists.
Why is it that the Holy Land Foundation is not yet part of this complaint?
I didn't know they weren't.
They weren't listed in your...
Yes. Yeah, my expert on Islamic charities will answer this. Rita Katz.
One of the things we're trying to show in this chart is basically the connection. The Al-Qaeda network doesn't fund, or the Islamic banking, the Saudi banking, don't fund only Al-Qaeda. They fund terrorism. And this is what we want to fight. The Holy Land Foundation had received funds from some of the charities that have been named in this lawsuit. Moreover, if you check the Israelis' records on who funds Hamas, you will see that it's the same charities as the ones that have been named by the United States government and many other governments as Al-Qaeda sources. This basically also shows part of the example that the bin Laden training camps are not only for Al-Qaeda. You can't go only after Al-Qaeda as Al-Qaeda. You go after terrorism. Al-Qaeda training camp has served Abu Sayyaf Group, Gamal Islamiyah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah. So it won't be a surprise to see that the same charities fund the same different terrorist organization. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
I didn't understand it either, but yet this gentleman hadn't spoken yet. Yes, sir.
Greg Gordon, Minneapolis Star-Tribune and McClatchy
Yes, sir.
newspapers. Could you talk just a bit about the international reach and what difficulties you'll have in pursuing assets, overseas assets, through a federal court in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we have, the United States has entered treaties with various governments, including Great Britain, where the Saudis have an awful lot of money, the ones we've named. They have a lot of money in London. There are treaties with other nations that allow us to go after collecting it. But listen, 22% of Citigroup is owned by Saudi interest. Some of these banks have branches in the United States. Some of these Islamic religious foundations have assets in the United States, some of which haven't been seized. They have offices in the United States. There are, believe me, there's an abundance of assets of the defendants that have been named that exist in the United States, so as we won't have to go and apply for treaties. There's a lot of assets here. We will be going after those assets. They own a lot of property in the United States. The United States is their favorite venue for investment, and we feel very confident we'll be able to collect these judgments when we receive them, and we feel very confident that we will receive these judgments because these folks are guilty. They're guilty as hell. Yes, Alan.
Ron, I'm Alan Frank from CNN. There are a lot of statements from the U.S. government and from the Saudi government in which, over the last months, they've said that they do not believe the bin Laden family group, Osama bin Laden's family's company, had participated. Yet I see you've named them as defendants. Can you tell us why you think, in fact, some of bin Laden's relatives have funded his operations?
Well, as an interesting fact, only 2 airplanes took off after September 11th in the United States. One of those airplanes contained members of the bin Laden group who President Bush allowed to take off when no other plane could take off so that they could gain safe haven in Saudi Arabia. That might give you a clue. Secondly, we are able to trace an awful lot of money through the Sudanese government, and there's an awful lot of allegations in the complaint. I hate to keep referring you to the complaint, but I'll show you the paragraphs in the complaint. There's actually been a book written about the bin Laden group and their connections with the funding of al-Qaeda. I don't think Mr. bin Laden, if he's still alive, is quite the black sheep that he's been portrayed to be. I think he's more like a goat. Yes, sir.
Sir, you talked a moment ago about Saudi Arabia and entities within that kingdom funding a terrorist. Are you talking about one of the 9/11 hijackers?
Yes.
Which one? And what were they doing?
The complaint will elaborate on that.
Okay, and the second question is for Jean-Paul. Jean-Paul, can you...
It's John Charles.
John Charles, sorry.
I know almost everybody in France is named John Paul, but he's not. John Charles.
You have different countries here. You have the Republic of Sudan mentioned. You have Saudi Arabia mentioned. Anything in your investigation, sir, having to do with Iraq?
Well, again, it's the beginning of the... We're just introducing the lawsuit today. It's just the beginning. Facts will come. More facts will come. I think, well, we did our job. We identified those people responsible for financing and funding and harboring, whatever, those networks. That's the essential. Today, I think it's historic in the war. It's an historic day again in the war against terrorism. The message is clear. It's sent to those people, as the families said earlier. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whether public or private entity or individual, will bring you to justice and you'll be accountable for the atrocities you committed. That's the essential for me today, just to think about the families. And again, the facts will come. More facts.
Yes, ma'am.
With CTV, Canadian Television.
I'm sorry, I missed something.
CTV, Canadian Television. It's another question, might refer to the bigger pages, but do you know how many Canadian plaintiffs there are, and do you expect some more?
3, and we've been contacted by 2 additional families. So there's 3 at this time. I think there are 9 or 13 French nationals, 4 or 5 Swiss nationals, several from South America. We're getting calls all the time. It takes a while to process these cases. We have rather elaborate information sheets that we ask them to fill out. And you'll notice in the complaint there are a number of what we call DOE, D-O-E, John and Jane Doe plaintiffs. And the reason for that is that we just have not had the time to process all these names. We will file an amended complaint within 30 days, which is our right under the federal law. And we will probably be adding several Gulf state oil companies and some additional banks, and we will fill in the names of the Does. There are some folks who, for privacy and security reasons, do not want their names in the complaint, and the procedure there is that we list them as Does, Jane or John Doe, and then we turn over a registry to the court to be kept under seal by the court with the identity of those victims until such time as the court orders that their identities be revealed. That's the procedure. Yes, sir, in the back.
CNSnews.com.
Sorry.
That's all right. It sounds as if you have 2 goals. First of all, to receive compensation for the families, and secondly, to financially disable the terrorist networks. The U.S. assets, it sounds like you can achieve the compensation goal, but some of these organizations are just huge. Can you really go after enough assets worldwide to disable them financially?
We're going to give our best shot, sir. We'll leave no stone unturned, I can assure you that. Okay, I guess my PR guy says that's it. Thank you very much for coming. If you have any questions for any of the families, they'll be over in the, what's the name of the room, Jody? Jody, what's the name of the room? Down upstairs. The Rayburn room, if anybody has any specific questions of any victims.